On January 23, 2006, a woman stepped into evening, spoke with the people she trusted, and quietly vanished. At 6:15 p.m., Jennifer Joyce Kesse, 24, financial manager, New Orlando condo owner, spoke with her parents as she drove home. She returned from a San Croix getaway only days earlier, confident, ambitious, stepping into her future. She hung up. Later, at 10 p.m., she called her boyfriend, Rob Allen. They said their goodnights. It was their final words. He would never hear her voice again. On January 24th, she did not show up for work. No morning text, no check-in. At 7 to 8 a.m., Rob tried contacting her, straight to voicemail. An uncharacteristic silence. Alarmed co-workers alerted her parents. Driving 2 hours from Tampa, Drew and Joyce Kesse called the condo manager and used a spare key to check. Inside, everything was as though she had simply stepped out. A damp towel lay at the shower's edge, her pajamas strewn across the bathroom floor, makeup tools on the counter, hairdryer in place, clothes laid out on the unmade bed. It looked ordinary, except there was no Jennifer. Missing. Her car, purse, keys, cell phone, iPod, all vanished. That same morning, surveillance footage, recording only 1 to 2 frames every 3 seconds, captured a person parking her black 2004 Chevy Malibu at another apartment complex about a mile away. This was around noon, but it wasn't flagged until January 26th, when a resident reported an abandoned car seen for days. The footage showed a figure walking away into anonymity, every image obscured by fence posts. They were faceless, nameless. Authorities called in the FBI and even NASA, attempting to enhance the clip. Their estimation? The person stood between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches and wore worker-style clothing. Large feet for their height suggested something more than coincidence. But the face stayed hidden. Inside that car, no signs of violent struggle, no forced entry, no fingerprints, no DNA except Jennifer's. But detectives noted what appeared to be smudged handprints, as if someone had been pushed or dragged across the hood toward the windshield. A boot print near the gas pedal stood large and solitary. The car had the feel of a crime scene sanitized. A bloodhound tracked a scent from the car directly back to Jennifer's apartment, bypassing the gated entrance, then climbing stairways to her second-floor unit. Yet, there were no other traces, no leads, no suspects emerging. So who is this unidentified figure? A construction worker? Someone with access to the property? Someone who thought themselves invisible? This is not a tale of a person who ran away. This is the story of a woman preparing for work, who walked out into a life unseen and left only silence behind. To understand Jennifer Kesse's disappearance, you have to understand the life she built, one brick at a time, and the city she built it in. Orlando in 2006 was not just a tourist hub of theme parks and vacation homes. It was one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, booming with construction, new real estate, and a rising workforce of young professionals. But rapid growth brought shadows, transient labor, half-finished housing complexes, and neighborhoods where strangers came and went as quickly as the Florida storms. Jennifer Kesse was, in many ways, the embodiment of this new Orlando. At just 24 years old, she had already achieved what many spend a lifetime chasing: financial independence, professional respect, and a home of her own. A 2003 graduate of the University of Central Florida, she had parlayed her degree into a coveted role at Central Florida Investments, known as Westgate Resorts, where she was a finance manager. Colleagues remembered her as driven, precise, and already marked for greater things. She wasn't just showing up for work, she was climbing. Her personal life was equally grounded. She spoke to her parents, Drew and Joyce, almost every day. She leaned on her younger brother Logan, not just as family, but as a close friend. And in Rob Allen, her long-distance boyfriend from Fort Lauderdale, she found stability and trust. They had been together for more than a year, and though separated by hours on the highway, their relationship thrived on constant calls and weekend visits. Their last phone conversation, hours before Jennifer vanished, would become a haunting detail of the case. According to Joyce Kesse, the mother, she stated, "She called us all the time, every single day. If I didn't hear from her, I knew something was wrong." According to Rob Allen, her boyfriend, "We talked late that night like always. She sounded normal. There was nothing unusual about that call. And then, nothing." Jennifer had recently purchased her first condo at Mosaic at Millenia, a gated community close to downtown Orlando. For her, it was a symbol of success, a declaration of independence. The gates, the guard, the proximity to work, it all gave her comfort. But behind those gates, reality was more complicated. The complex was under heavy renovation. Many units were unoccupied. Some had been turned into temporary housing for construction workers, most of them transient. Jennifer confided in family that the environment didn't feel safe. She was cautious, always alert, but she could not shake the unease. She told her parents that the workers made comments, whistled at her, stared too long. She would sometimes stay on the phone until they left her condo, keeping the door cracked, unwilling to let her guard down. The harassment wasn't constant, but it was unsettling, and Jennifer, who prided herself on being careful, noticed every detail. She carried pepper spray, she kept routines tight, and she made sure her loved ones knew where she was at all times. For Jennifer, safety wasn't paranoia, it was discipline. Her friends and co-workers described her as meticulous. She laid out clothes the night before. She never missed work. If she was running late, she called. Her reliability was more than habit. It was her identity. So when she failed to show up at her office on the morning of January 24th, every alarm bell rang at once. But before we reach that moment, we have to look at the environment she vanished into. Orlando's promise of opportunity was matched by an undercurrent of crime. Theft, car break-ins, and assaults rippled through neighborhoods around the Millenia Mall district. Police knew the area well. So did Jennifer. She wasn't naive, but she was just one young woman, alone in a half-finished complex, surrounded by strangers who knew her routines better than she realized. In the weeks before her disappearance, Jennifer confided in family about one particular discomfort. She hated walking past the workers who lingered near her condo. She mentioned feeling watched. She described catcalls. She told her father she kept her phone with her in those moments, just in case. These weren't fleeting impressions. They were the quiet notes of a woman who sensed something wasn't right. And yet, she carried on, commuting to work, traveling with friends, building a future with Rob. She had just returned from a weekend trip to St. Croix, rejuvenated, sun-kissed, full of stories. The night before she vanished, she spoke with her family. She laughed on the phone with Rob. Everything seemed normal, but the stage was set. Her routines, her independence, her vulnerabilities, all converged in that small window of time. Jennifer Kesse's world was built on order, discipline, and safety. But by the morning of January 24th, 2006, every piece of that structure collapsed. Her condo would bear silent witness. Clothes laid out for work, a damp towel on the floor, her bed untouched since the night before. And just 1 mile away, her black Chevy Malibu would appear, abandoned, parked by an unknown figure whose face, to this day, no one has ever identified. Jennifer Kesse was last heard from on the night of January 23rd, 2006. After work that evening, she spoke with her father, Drew, then drove home to her new condo at the Mosaic at Millenia. At 10 p.m., she called her boyfriend, Rob Allen, from her landline. They talked for a while about their trip to Sainte Croix just days before, about the week ahead, and about nothing unusual at all. They said goodnight. For Rob, it was just another call. For investigators, it was the last certain moment of Jennifer's life. The following morning, January 24th, was the first fracture in the pattern Jennifer had so carefully built. She did not answer Rob's early calls on his commute. Her phone went directly to voicemail. By 11 a.m., her manager noticed she had not arrived at work. This was not Jennifer. She was precise. She was dependable. If she was going to be late, she called. If she was going to be absent, she informed someone. Her silence was a thunderclap. At 3 p.m., Drew and Joyce Kesse drove straight to Orlando. When they entered Jennifer's condo, the unease hardened into certainty. Inside, her world was paused mid-routine. A damp towel suggested she had showered. Her pajamas were tossed on the floor. Her clothes for work that day were neatly laid out. But her bed was unmade, and her cell phone, purse, keys, and work badge were gone. To investigators, the scene whispered one conclusion. Jennifer had been ready to leave for work, and never made it. Her car was gone. For the next 48 hours, so was Jennifer. Friends, family, and police searched surrounding streets, calling hospitals, driving through parking lots, checking apartment complexes. Every lead collapsed. Then, on January 26th, came the first major discovery. At Huntington-on-the-Green, a condominium complex just over a mile from Mosaic, a black Chevy Malibu sat abandoned. It was Jennifer's. The car had been parked there on the day Jennifer disappeared, around noon. Security cameras caught it, but fate intervened cruelly. The complex's system recorded only one frame every 3 seconds. In each frame, a fence post cut directly across the suspect's face. NASA, the FBI, and multiple forensic labs tried to enhance the footage. No technology, not then, not now, could lift the obstruction. All they could say: the individual was between 5'3" and 5'5", wearing clothes like a painter or construction worker. Gender? Unclear. Identity? Lost in the gaps of 3 frozen seconds. Investigators combed the car for evidence. There were no fingerprints beyond Jennifer's, no usable DNA. A single boot print pressed into the driver's side floor mat, and on the hood, streaks and impressions, as if someone had pushed a body back, dragged across metal. But nothing conclusive. No fibers, no hairs, no wallet, no purse, no phone. The car was as clean as a courtroom exhibit, emptied of clues. Defense attorneys would later say, this was a ghost crime scene. Someone knew how to leave nothing behind. That area, cars got stolen, people broke in. You didn't walk around alone. Huntington was the wrong place for a young woman's car to end up. Witnesses surfaced. One reported seeing Jennifer's car driving erratically the morning she disappeared, swerving as if the driver was unfamiliar with it, or as if something was happening inside. But the tip led nowhere. Others recalled nothing unusual at all. Each recollection was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Jennifer Kesse's last known hours were ordinary in every way. Phone calls, a shower, clothes readied for work, and then silence. The only evidence of what came next was a car parked by a faceless figure and an apartment that bore no witness except routine itself. In the language of law, absence is not evidence. But in Jennifer's case, absence was everything. Her absence at work, her absence on the phone, her absence from her car. A woman had been removed from her own life with surgical precision. And the questions left behind would haunt Orlando for years to come. In every disappearance, the first 48 hours, are everything. Leads are fresh, witnesses remember, suspects have not yet covered their tracks. In Jennifer Kesse's case, those hours passed, and with them, the best chance of finding her alive. Orlando police responded. But to her family, the response felt bureaucratic, deliberate, too slow for a daughter who had never once gone missing before. To law enforcement, Jennifer was an adult with the right to vanish. To her parents, Joyce and Drew, the assumption was unthinkable. They knew Jennifer's habits. They knew her reliability. This was not a woman who disappeared by choice. But convincing the system of that took time. And time in this case was fatal. Drew Kesse stated, "We begged them. We told them this wasn't Jennifer. She didn't just leave. But the answer we kept hearing was, 'Give it time.' We didn't have time." In the vacuum of official urgency, the family stepped in. They organized searches. They printed thousands of flyers. They went door to door. They gave interviews to any station that would listen. The Kesses transformed into investigators, advocates, and publicists for their own missing daughter. What the system did not do, they tried to do themselves. Jennifer had just purchased her condo, independence, stability, a new life. But the building was not complete. Construction workers came and went daily. Temporary labor, undocumented employees, faces that could vanish by nightfall. Jennifer confided in her parents and her boyfriend. They made her uncomfortable. They whistled. They catcalled. They watched. It was a classic investigative lead, opportunity plus access. The theory that one of the workers abducted her, either from her condo or the parking lot. The family believed it was plausible. Detectives interviewed dozens. They ran background checks. They looked for ties to violence, to drugs, to crime. But nothing stuck. No fingerprints. No DNA. Not one shred of physical evidence inside Jennifer's car or condo pointed to the workers. Suspicion, yes. Proof, no. Jennifer's belongings told a story. The clothes she planned to wear to work, laid out neatly. A damp towel in the bathroom, proof of her morning routine. She had made it out of the shower, out of her door, and likely toward her car. But she never arrived at her office. The theory, Jennifer was attacked in the most vulnerable stretch of her day, her walk to her Malibu. If this theory is true, Jennifer was taken swiftly, silently, without witness. Her car later reappeared. She did not. In any disappearance, investigators look first to those closest. Rob Allen, Jennifer's boyfriend, lived 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale. He spoke with her at 10 p.m., the night before she vanished. By all accounts, their relationship was stable. He was quickly cleared. His phone records, his location, his cooperation. Still, suspicion never disappears completely. Ex-boyfriends were interviewed, co-workers too. In the absence of evidence, proximity breeds suspicion, but prosecutors know suspicion is not enough to indict. Another theory spread beyond Orlando. Florida, a corridor for trafficking. Highways, ports, international flights. Could Jennifer have been abducted and sold into a network? Some detectives floated the possibility. Others dismissed it as speculation. No confirmed sightings, no credible tips, no ransom, nothing. The theory was terrifying, but unprovable. Witness testimony emerged, and with it, contradictions. A neighbor claimed a strange white van sat outside Jennifer's condo days before. Another said men seemed to be watching her, following her with their eyes. Others swore they saw nothing unusual. Each account added color, but not clarity. For detectives, it was a puzzle where the pieces refused to fit. Investigators pressed for broader searches. Judges demanded probable cause. Without evidence of a crime inside her condo, search warrants were delayed. At Mosaic, Management hesitated. Attorneys raised liability concerns. Entire areas of the complex were off limits, at least initially. Hours stretched into days. The law, designed to protect rights, instead slowed the search for truth. Drew Kesse stated, "We don't care about red tape. We don't care about liability. We care about finding Jennifer. And every delay was one more chance for her to slip further away." The Kesses faced a dilemma no family should endure: trusting a system that felt broken or fighting it at every turn. They demanded FBI involvement. They called politicians. They gathered volunteers. They made Jennifer's face unavoidable across Florida. They were parents turned detectives, turned litigators against silence. It was a duel between a grieving family and the machinery of bureaucracy. By the end of that first month, Jennifer's case had theories, contradictions, suspects, bureaucracy, and grief, but no answers. In the language of the courtroom, it was a case without a defendant. In the language of a family, it was a daughter stolen from her life. The evidence pointed everywhere and nowhere, and as weeks turned to months, the most haunting possibility emerged. Jennifer might never be found. Every courtroom has its witness. In Jennifer Kesse's case, the witness was a camera. It caught her car being abandoned at Huntington on the Green. It caught her abductor walking away, but it never caught their face. A fence post, a single obstruction, hid the truth in every frame. In that moment, Jennifer's case became something far more complex than a disappearance. It became a war against time, technology, and silence. Desperate for clarity, detectives turned to NASA. Engineers who guided satellites and space shuttles were asked to enhance a video from a strip mall parking lot. If there was a courtroom reveal moment, this was it. The family waited. The media watched. Investigators prepared for a breakthrough. But technology has limits. The fence post blocked the suspect's face in every single frame. NASA could clean the pixels, adjust the lighting, sharpen the contrast, but they could not bend physics. The ghost remained a ghost. The only takeaway, the person's height. 5'3" to 5'5". That was it. In a trial, this would never stand. No jury convicts on a silhouette. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution would show you Jennifer Kesse's car. They would show you the video of it being parked. They would tell you she was never seen again. But where is the DNA? Where are the fingerprints? Where is the witness who saw her being taken? Circumstantial evidence, at best. Reasonable doubt, at every turn. This case could not go to trial. And so, the Kesse family built their own. Not in a courtroom, but in the streets, in the press, and in the hearts of anyone who would listen. What do you do when the police cannot find your daughter? You become the police. The Kesses hired private investigators. They interviewed people law enforcement had overlooked. They drove across the state chasing tips. They built binders thicker than trial exhibits, compiling every rumor, every sighting, every whisper. At times, it looked less like a missing persons case and more like litigation. Lawyers on one side, desperate parents on the other, both trying to out-argue silence. Joyce stated, "We've had to be Jennifer's voice every single day, because if we don't speak for her, no one else will." Rumors began to swirl. Was evidence mishandled? Were tips lost? Some detectives admitted the possibility. Others denied it outright. In a system strained by resources, overwhelmed with cases, mistakes happen. But for the Kesses, mistakes meant lost years. It meant the difference between resolution and despair. Every gap in the file became a wound. Every missing page felt like betrayal. Hundreds of tips poured in, some from psychics, some from strangers, some detailed, others absurd. Many were logged, some were ignored. Police departments must sift through noise, but in the chaos, real leads can vanish. The Kesses chased every tip themselves. They travelled to dead-end addresses. They sat across from liars, drifters, and opportunists. They heard false confessions and empty promises. Each time they hoped. Each time they were let down. In Drew words, when your daughter is missing, you don't get to ignore calls. You don't get to dismiss tips, because that one call you didn't take, that could have been the one. Time is its own punishment. Every birthday, every holiday, every year without answers deepened the wound. Joyce and Drew became public figures against their will, standing on stages, giving speeches, begging for anyone to come forward. Rob Allen, the boyfriend who spoke to Jennifer the night before she vanished, lived under the weight of survivor's guilt. Could he have driven to Orlando that night? Could he have noticed something? He would never know. Co-workers felt her absence daily. Her desk, untouched, became a reminder that reliability can vanish in a single moment. Neighbours who once muttered about catcalls went silent. Memories faded. Courage dwindled. Silence became its own wall. Eventually, Jennifer's case joined a graveyard of others, the cold case files. New detectives inherited it, each forced to learn a decade of dead ends before starting their own search. They reopened leads. They retested evidence. But with nothing new to test, nothing new to chase, progress slowed to a crawl. Every new investigator gave hope, but also the pain of starting over. For the family, it felt like rewinding a nightmare, again and again. By 2015, nearly a decade after Jennifer vanished, the case had theories, suspects, rumours, and heartbreak. What it did not have was evidence. In the courtroom of truth, there was no witness, no defendant, no verdict, only silence. Jennifer's absence was not just an unsolved crime. It was a test of faith, a measure of how much a family could endure when justice refused to speak. The question remained, how does a young woman vanish in broad daylight in the heart of a city and leave nothing behind? 10 years had passed since Jennifer Joyce Kesse vanished from her Orlando condominium. 10 years of unanswered calls, dead-end leads, and sleepless nights for her family. On a cold day in December 2016, a judge delivered a ruling that carried the weight of finality, but none of the substance. Jennifer was declared legally dead. No body had ever been found. No suspect had ever stood trial. The declaration was not based on evidence but on time, the law's calculation that 10 years of silence equals death. For her parents, Drew and Joyce Kesse, it was not closure. It was a legal necessity, a bureaucratic stamp allowing for insurance claims, estate matters, and technicalities. But it was also an admission. The state of Florida had no answers left to give. Joyce Kesse in an interview, her voice trembling but steady. We didn't want this. We didn't want to sign her death into existence. But they made us, and it still doesn't give us Jennifer back. Then came the revelation that deepened suspicion and widened the circle of possible suspects. Investigators confirmed that maintenance workers and contractors at Jennifer's condo complex held master keys. Keys that could open every door, including hers. These men were not permanent staff. They were day labourers, often hired off the books, paid by the job, and never vetted. Some disappeared as quickly as they arrived. Jennifer had confided to her parents just days earlier that she felt uneasy. She told them she had been catcalled by construction workers. She described men staring, whistling, making her uncomfortable in her own home. She wanted to change her routine, to feel safe again. And then she was gone. Statement from Drew Kesse. When we found out about the keys, it was like the bottom fell out. They had access to everything, and nobody kept records. Nobody even knew who came and went. By 2017, the Kesse family no longer trusted the system. For over a decade, They had been told the same thing. The case was active. Files could not be released. Yet every year passed with no arrests, no progress. Frustrated, the family turned to the courts. They sued the Orlando Police Department for access to Jennifer's case files, arguing that the investigation had effectively gone cold and that transparency was their only path to the truth. Your Honor, the Kesses have been treated as outsiders in their own daughter's case. The police refuse to share what they have, yet admit there's no suspect, no movement, no hope. If justice is still possible, then it should not come at the cost of silence. The opposing counsel responds, coolly measured. Releasing these files could jeopardize future prosecution. The integrity of the investigation must be preserved. The argument was circular. Future prosecution of whom? After more than a decade, no one had been named, no charges filed. The courtroom itself became symbolic. The Kesses versus the very institution tasked with finding Jennifer. In 2018, after a hard-fought legal battle, the Kesse family received over 16,000 pages of files. What they found was devastating. Tips had been ignored. Witness statements lost in bureaucracy. Leads that once seemed promising had gone unpursued. The picture that emerged was not of a diligent investigation, but of a case starved of attention, mishandled from the start. Joyce Kesse's statement to media. It was like reliving the nightmare all over again. We had begged for years, only to find out the answers were sitting in boxes. The family hired private investigators, combed through records, and re-interviewed witnesses. They ran their own parallel investigation, essentially building a courtroom outside of the legal system. For them, the trial had shifted. No longer was it Jennifer's unknown abductor on the stand. It was the system itself. The verdict was grim. The family concluded that Jennifer had likely been taken by someone with access, perhaps one of the workers at her complex, and that she never made it past her own front door. But without evidence, without a body, and without cooperation from those who might know the truth, they had no way to prove it. The case remained frozen in limbo. Drew Kesse in interview, his voice raw. We thought our fight was against whoever took our daughter, but the real fight became against the system, against the silence, against the mistakes. That's what no parent should ever have to face. By 2016, Jennifer Kesse was declared legally dead. Yet the truth remains alive, in whispers, in records, in unanswered questions. The law delivered a verdict without a trial. The family, left with paper instead of answers. And the shadowy figure who walked away from her car still walks free. Nearly 2 decades have passed since January 24th, 2006. And yet, Jennifer Kesse's disappearance remains what it was on day 1, unsolved. No one has been arrested. No one has been charged. No one has confessed. Her body has never been found. What began as a missing persons investigation became something larger. A study of what happens when the justice system collides with the unknown. The law demands evidence. It requires witnesses, timelines, and proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But what happens when those elements are missing? When a case is defined by what isn't there? For Drew and Joyce Kesse, the passage of time has not dulled their pursuit. They remain advocates, not just for Jennifer, but for all missing persons whose families face the same silence. They have spoken at rallies, pressed lawmakers, and challenged police agencies. Their fight is no longer just about Jennifer. It is about accountability, about demanding that no case be left behind simply because it grows difficult. We live every day without Jennifer. That doesn't mean we live without her case. Someone knows what happened, and we won't stop. Jennifer's disappearance is not just her story. It is a mirror held up to the justice system itself. A system that is powerful when it has evidence, and powerless when it does not. A system that can declare a young woman legally dead without ever proving how, when, or by whose hand she was taken. In the eyes of the law, Jennifer's case is incomplete. In the eyes of her family, it will never be closed. And so we are left with questions. Was Jennifer taken by someone she trusted? A neighbor, a worker with a key, someone who knew her routines? Or was she claimed by a stranger who slipped into the night, leaving only shadows and silence?